Good morning, everyone. I am Abdullah Fazi, and today I'm going to discuss the international humanitarian law, its application on the ongoing war between Israel and Palestine. So, the outline of my presentation would be the context, first of all, the construction of wall by Israel, its impact on Palestinian people, and also, very importantly, the ICJ's advisory opinion, which actually shows the legal implications of the construction of the wall. After this, I would discuss the legal status of Gaza Strip under the international law, status of Israel over the Palestinian territory, occupied territory, and then I would discuss the uh, Geneva Convention, Common Article 3 application of it on the ongoing war, and then some of the important issues has been highlighted in media as well, such as the bombing at hospitals, bombing at mosques, churches, schools, and hostage taking by Hamas, rocket fired by Hamas. So, what is the position of international law on all these issues? And in the end, I would like to discuss the responsibility mechanism of international law under the International Criminal Court. So first of all, if we talk about the construction of wall issue, which is very important in order to understand the recent conflict. So since 2003, Israel has started building a wall on the occupied territory of Palestine, and it is still continued. And since then, it has been an issue of conflict between these two nations. So Israel takes this wall as a deterrence, as a defense against so-called terrorism of Palestinians. However, the Palestinians take this wall as a restriction to their liberty, restriction to their movement, restriction to their basic needs and amenities. The ICJ has actually concluded its finding on the construction of wall in 2009. So ICJ found that the wall constitute a de facto annexation, which is prohibited by Article 2.4 of the UN Charter and General Assembly Resolution 2625. And it further found that this wall has basically impacted very badly on the Palestinians. Not only that, it is a violation of the international humanitarian law. So the construction of wall was found to be contrary to the international humanitarian law, particularly 1907 Hague regulations. It violates the Geneva Conventions Article 49, Article 47, Article 42 and 43, and Article 49 of the Geneva Conventions. And therefore, the ICJ, in its advisory opinion, recommended and ordered Israel to dismantle the wall and stop constructing it further on. Not only that, but also provide the reparation to those who have actually suffered because of the construction of this wall. However, due to the lack of compliance, none of these recommendations have been met since then, and until now, 19 years have been passed. Israel did not stop the construction of wall and has continued. And because of that, the lives of Palestinians become more miserable because each time they have to cross that wall, the border, they have to comply with so many restrictions and documentations imposed by the Israeli authorities over the Palestinians. So each time they have to go for work, they have to go for the treatment, they have to go for the education or anything. They have to cross that particular so-called border on the land of occupied Palestinian territory. And because of that, there is a active blockade of Gaza, which has been imposed by the Israeli forces. So now, if we talk about the legal status of Gaza, Israel has been occupying the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza since 1967. However, in 2005, unilaterally, Israel withdrew from the Gaza, but it does not mean that the occupation has actually ended, which is not. Why? Because Israel has maintained the effective control over the Gaza, including its territorial border, its territorial waters, and its airspace. Gaza has been covered, has been actually surrounded by Israel. Only one side is actually the sea, which is surrounded by which is controlled by the Israel maritime forces, and one border is actually touched with they share with the Egypt, and that border controlled by the Egyptian authorities, not by the Gaza. So this is an effective blockade of Gaza. So if we talk about the recent conflict, we are seeing clear violations of Geneva Conventions, particularly in terms of attacking and targeting the civilian objectives. So Article 52 of the Geneva Convention protects civilian objects and it limits the target. It says that civilian objects shall not be the object of the attack, and also further says that attacks shall be limited strictly to the military objectives. However, we are seeing the clear violation by Israeli forces that they are bombarding the Gaza Strip indiscriminately, and there is no identification of the particular object, whether that particular object is military object or not. And what is the military object? What is the legitimate object, which we need to understand in light of Article 52 of the Geneva Convention? Military object is the only object which actually worth targeting and which is actually contributing in terms of military and actually damaging your forces. So that is called the enemy object or the military object that is actually contributing in war, not the civilian objectives. And in light of this, if we talk about the nature of this conflict, it is not only we cannot say that it is a pure international conflict, because one party we can see that there is a clearly a state. However, the other party is a group which is which is actually not enjoying the status of a state yet, and we call them Hamas. And most of the Western countries, they declared them as the terrorist organization. And on the other hand, some of the other countries, they're actually taking it as a resistance movement. So in order to apply the Geneva Convention on both, I think the Common Article 3 has gained most importance here, because it is applicable on international states as well, and also on the non-state actors. So what it calls, it requires the human treatment of all prisoners in enemy hand, and also it requires the wounded and sick to be cared and collected, and it grants the ICRC the right to offer its services in the conflict zone. And given that the most important conflict today, which is the non-international conflict, applying Common Article 3 is the utmost importance, and it should be respected fully. And then if we talk about the principle of proportionality, which is also very important, because what we are seeing here, the Israeli aircrafts, they are dropping bombs anywhere in Gaza, and they have actually turned the city into ashes. So basically, the principle of proportionality of international humanitarian law seeks to limit the damage caused by military operations by requiring that the effects of the means and methods of the warfare used must not be disproportionate to the military advantages sought. So an attack which may be expected to cause incidental loss of civilian lives, injured of civilians, damage to the civilian objects should be avoided. So intentional launching of an attack by having the knowledge that such attack will cause incidental loss of life or the injury of the civilian would amount to a war crime. So the proportionality principle again gains most importance here. And then after that, if we talk about the other issues from the Israeli perspective, such as the hostage taking by Hamas. So hostage taking is clearly prohibited in non-international armed conflicts, and under Article 1B of Common Article 3, as I mentioned earlier, of the Geneva Convention, hostage taking can include civilians, people taking no active part in the hostilities. It also includes those who are actually militants who are actually not taking active part in the armed conflict, and they have actually surrendered in front of the enemy, so they should be treated respectfully and humanly. So people taken as hostage, like all held in custody, must be treated humanly and cannot be used as a human shield. So now we should talk about the very important issue, and I think there should be an investigation on that issue from the violation of the international humanitarian law perspective, and that is the issue of bombing at the hospital. So that is, of course, it is a grave violation of the international humanitarian law, and a targeted attack on medical facility is a violation of IHL and can constitute a war crime if it is intentional. So what we are seeing in the case of Al-Ahli hospital earlier, and now the other hospital of Gaza called Al-Quds hospital, that Israel has actually given them the warning that to evacuate that hospital so that they can bombard that hospital. So this is a clear violation of international humanitarian law. So the ICC and the United Nations Security Council and the United Nations in general also should take notice of this sort of warnings that bombing at hospitals should not be allowed in any case. There are some cases where after warning this type of attacks can be sought out, but in that case there should be a clear identification that that particular facility, for example the hospital, is actually used by militants. And even then if they are using that, even then they the attack should be very proportionate according to the response. For example, if we identify that one enemy is firing by the hospital, so we should only attack that particular individual, not the entire hospital. So that precaution should be observed. So what we see now, the target verification become the very important element of the entire warfare. Both sides are actually violating this the principle of target verification, and the issue of attacking mosques and the schools by the Israel army is actually a clear indication that there is no target verification has been conducted by the Israeli army. So Article 57.2 of the 1977 additional protocol provides that there should be precautions shall be taken so that those who are actually planning to attack such targets which are actually civilian in nature, so then before that there should be a very enthusiastic and very clear investigation and identification of the target should be carried out in order to hit that particular target. Not like this, because last night we have seen that 450 targets have been destroyed by the Israeli forces. So there is a very less chance that they have actually carried out this particular criteria. They have actually observed that particular criteria of target verification. Then there is a very few chance of that. And then the issue of rocket fired by Hamas, and again this is a very important issue. The targeting of military installations and other military objectives is totally allowed if the rocket aimed at military objective, if the rocket aimed at military facilities, if the rocket aimed at the enemy facilities, then it is allowed. However, if the rocket fired at the civil objectives, then it is not allowed, and it can constitute a war crime. And the issue of targeting leaders of Palestinian armed group, which is very again a sensitive issue. If they are, what is the position of international law here? The international law position is quite clear here. If they are taking part in military activity, if they are fighting against the army, in that case, yes, they can be targeted. However, in case of Hamas, we can say that Hamas is not only a military organization, but also a civil organization which actually controls and governs Gaza. So those leaders of Hamas, those individuals of Hamas who are actually not taking part in the warfare, and I think those cannot be targeted under the international law. And after that, what we are seeing, the collective punishment given by the Israeli forces to the all people of Gaza, and since the beginning of war until now, some 8,000 people have been killed by the Israeli indiscriminated attacks. And then I think this particular issue has been very important since then, because what they are doing, the Israeli defense minister's language, which I mentioned earlier, that he has used the language of genocide, and he has mentioned that those who are living in Gaza, they are like animals. So if you are using this language, it strongly suggests that you are actually believing in collective punishment, and giving collective punishment and aiming for the collective punishment. And what we are seeing here is actually again a war crime under the international humanitarian law. So now I would like to discuss the jurisdiction of the ICC, International Criminal Court. Yes, the International Criminal Court has the jurisdiction over the war crimes wherever they occur. So basically, the ICC has jurisdiction over the war crimes against humanity, genocide committed in the territory, regardless of the nationality of the alleged crimes. So the alleged crime committed during the fighting between the Israel and Palestine group could be investigated by the ICC prosecutor. And earlier on March 31st, 2021, the ICC prosecutor opened an investigation into the alleged serious crimes committed in Palestine since 13 March 2014, and the court judges have said that they have the jurisdiction over the territory occupied by the Israel since 1967, namely Gaza and West Bank, including the East Jerusalem. So Israel signed but actually did not ratify the treaty. However, the Human Rights Watch also called on the ICC prosecutors to investigate Israeli authorities implicated in the crimes against humanity and apartheid and prosecution against the Palestinian people. So this was the entire scenario from the international law perspective. We have discussed all these issues, and basically there are gross violations are actually going on by both the parties, and there is strong need to call for a ceasefire, immediate ceasefire that actually needed in Gaza, because now the Gaza has turned into ashes, as I mentioned earlier, and now there is a lackage of food, lackage of fuel, lackage of electricity and everything, shortage of electricity and everything, and now people are dying because of hunger, not only because of the war, not only because of the bomb. So I think this is the high time that we should discuss the international law, the respect of international law, the application and implementation of international humanitarian law on the ongoing war. And since the Israel is a state party, Israel is a recognized state by most. Of course, the United Nations also recognizes the Israel. So Israel has actually carries more responsibility in terms of these gross violations of war crimes and allegations of war crime. Israel should respect those principles of Geneva Conventions, as I mentioned earlier, in comparison to the other groups. I think that's all for today. Thank you very much.